It's 3 in the morning and you're still awake. Not because you can't sleep, but because your mind won't let you. You're replaying a conversation from 6 hours ago, analyzing every word, every pause, every facial expression. Did they mean what they said? Were they annoyed? Did you say something wrong? And then your brain jumps to tomorrow, spinning through every possible scenario, every potential disaster, every way things could go wrong. You try to quiet your thoughts to just rest, but it's like trying to stop a freight train with your bare hands. Your mind is a courtroom, and you're both the prosecutor and the defendant, cross-examining yourself endlessly, never reaching a verdict. And the exhausting part, this isn't occasional. This is your default state. This is how you've lived for as long as you can remember. Thinking, analyzing, questioning, doubting, over and over and over until you're so tired you QA in. Tell the difference between rational concern and irrational spiral. Welcome to the Psychology of Overthinking. And if this is you, you already know. You know what it's like to live in your head more than you live in the world. You know what it's like to be exhausted by your own thoughts. And you know what it's like when people tell you to just stop thinking so much, as if you haven't tried that 1,000 times already. Here's what most people don't understand about overthinking. It's not a choice. It's not something you can just turn off like a light switch. Overthinkers aren't being dramatic or attention-seeking or indecisive for fun. They're trapped in a cognitive pattern that feels as involuntary as breathing. And that pattern, it usually starts somewhere in childhood. Maybe you grew up in an environment where unpredictability was the norm, where moods shifted without warning, and you had to learn to read every signal, every change in atmosphere, just to feel safe. So your brain developed hypervigilance as a survival mechanism. It learned to analyze everything, to anticipate threats, to prepare for every possible outcome, because being caught off guard meant pain, conflict, or chaos. Or maybe you grew up in a family where mistakes weren't tolerated, where love felt conditional, tied to your performance, your behavior, your ability to get things right. So you learned to overthink every decision because getting it wrong wasn't just disappointing. It was proof that you weren't good enough. Either way, overthinking didn't start as a personality flaw. It started as a solution, a way your brain learned to keep you safe in an environment that felt unsafe. The problem is that solution became permanent. Even when the danger passed, even when you left those environments, your brain kept running the same program. And now you're an adult living in relative safety, but your mind is still scanning, still analyzing, still preparing for threats that may never come. Psychologists have studied this extensively. Overthinking, clinically known as rumination, is one of the most common cognitive patterns associated with anxiety and depression. A study from the University of Michigan found that people who engage in chronic rumination have significantly higher levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, than those who don't. Their bodies are in a constant state of low-grade stress because their minds never rest. Another study published in the Journal of Abnormal Psychology revealed that overthinkers have heightened activity in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for complex thinking and decision. Sounds good, right? More brain activity means smarter. Not exactly, because when that area is overactive, it creates a feedback loop. You think about a problem, which generates more thoughts about the problem, which generates anxiety about those thoughts, which makes you think even more. It's like your brain is stuck in an infinite loop with no exit button. And the cruel irony, overthinkers are often highly intelligent. They have complex minds capable of deep analysis. But that gift becomes a curse when it can't be turned off. When every simple decision becomes a philosophical debate. When every interaction gets dissected until there's nothing left but anxiety and doubt. Let's talk about what overthinking actually looks like in daily life. Because it's not just about lying awake at night, though that's part of it. It's the paralysis that comes with simple decisions. What to order at a restaurant becomes a calculation of what others will think, what's socially acceptable, what might upset your stomach, what you'll regret later. Sending a text message becomes a composition project. You write it, rewrite it, analyze the tone, worry about how it will be received. Imagine every possible response. And sometimes just delete it altogether because the anxiety of getting it wrong is too much. You walk away from conversations and immediately start replaying them in your mind, scrutinizing every word you said, convinced you sounded stupid or awkward or offensive. You make plans and then spend days leading up to them, imagining every way they could go wrong, every possible social misstep, every potential disaster, until you're so exhausted by the anticipation that you cancel, and then you overthink the cancellation. Did you hurt their feelings? Do they think you're flaky? Will they stop inviting you? The thoughts never stop. They just shift targets. Here's something that overthinkers rarely talk about but desperately need to hear. Overthinking is often rooted in a desperate need for control. When you've experienced chaos, unpredictability, or trauma, your brain tries to regain control by thinking through every possibility. If I can anticipate every outcome, if I can prepare for every scenario, then I won't be caught off guard. Then I'll be safe. But life isn't controllable. Life is inherently uncertain. And the more you try to think your way into certainty, the more anxious you become because you can never think enough to eliminate all variables. You can never plan enough to guarantee safety. So you think more and more and more, chasing a sense of control that will never come through thought alone. It's like trying to drink your way out of thirst with salt. The more you consume, the thirstier you get. Psychologists call this intolerance of uncertainty, and it's a core feature of anxiety disorders. Research shows that people with high intolerance of uncertainty engage in significantly more rumination than those who can sit with ambiguity. They need to know. They need answers. They need certainty. And when they can't have it, their minds spiral trying to create it. There's also the perfectionism component. Many overthinkers are perfectionists, though they might not recognize it as such. They don't see themselves as striving for perfection. They just see themselves as trying not to mess up. But that's what perfectionism is at its core. The belief that mistakes are unacceptable, that being wrong is dangerous, that you have to get it right or face some catastrophic consequence. So every decision becomes weighted with impossible stakes. Every choice feels like it could lead to disaster, and your mind tries to protect you by analyzing every angle, considering every possibility, running endless simulations of how things could go. But this doesn't lead to better decisions. Research from the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that excessive deliberation actually leads to worse outcomes and lower satisfaction. Why? Because when you overthink, you lose touch with your intuition, with your gut feeling, with the wisdom that comes from trusting yourself. You get so caught up in the analysis that you can't see the forest for the trees. You make decisions based on avoiding the worst case scenario rather than moving toward what you actually want. And then you regret it. And then you overthink the regret. The cycle never ends. Let's dig into the social cost of overthinking, because it doesn't just affect you internally. It affects your relationships, your career, your entire life. Overthinkers often struggle with genuine connection because they read too busy managing how they read being perceived to actually be present. You're in a conversation, but you're not really there. You're monitoring your facial expressions, your body language, your word choices. You're analyzing their reactions, trying to gauge their mood, wondering if they're annoyed or bored or judging you. And meanwhile, the actual conversation is happening without you fully participating in it. People might describe you as distant, guarded, or hard to read, not because you want to be, but because you're so busy thinking about the interaction that you can't relax into it. This creates a painful paradox. You desperately want connection, but your overthinking makes authentic connection nearly impossible. You want people to like you, but your hyper-awareness of how you're coming across makes you stiff, awkward, overly careful, and then you go home and replay the entire interaction, cataloging every moment where you felt off, every word that didn't land right, every silence that felt too long. You torture yourself with the analysis while the other person probably didn't think twice about any of it. In the workplace, overthinking can be equally destructive. You might be incredibly capable, but you second-guess yourself constantly. You check your work obsessively, triple-checking emails before sending them, revising documents endlessly, seeking reassurance that you're doing things right. This looks like conscientiousness on the surface, but underneath it's anxiety. It's the fear of making a mistake, of being criticized, of being exposed as you might avoid taking risks or pursuing opportunities because you've already imagined all the ways you could fail. You play out the worst case scenarios so vividly that they feel real, and the anxiety of that imagined failure is enough to keep you stuck. Or maybe you're the opposite. Maybe you're high achieving, driven by the need to prove yourself to be beyond reproach. But even when you succeed, you can't enjoy it because your mind is already moving to the next thing, the next potential failure, the next mountain you have to climb to feel okay. Success doesn't quiet the overthinking. It just gives you more material to analyze. Here's the thing about overthinkers. That's both heartbreaking and hopeful. They're often incredibly empathetic. They think so much about how their words and actions affect others because they care deeply about not causing harm. They replay conversations because they genuinely want to understand and connect. They anticipate problems because they want to be helpful, reliable, prepared. In other words, overthinking often comes from a place of profound sensitivity and care. The problem isn't the caring. The problem is that the caring has been weaponized by anxiety. It's been twisted into a tool of self-torture rather than a gift of connection. So when people tell overthinkers to just stop caring so much, they're missing the point. The goal isn't to stop caring. It's to care without drowning in it, to be thoughtful to be conscientious without being consumed. Let's talk about the physical toll, because overthinking isn't just mental, it's physiological. When your brain is in constant analysis mode, your body's in constant stress mode. That heightened cortisol we mentioned earlier, it affects everything. It disrupts your sleep, weakens your immune system, contributes to inflammation, raises your blood pressure. Overthinkers often deal with chronic tension, headaches, digestive issues, muscle pain, fatigue. Their bodies are exhausted from carrying the weight of their thoughts. And sleep. Sleep becomes a battleground. You lie down desperate for rest, and your mind decides it's the perfect time to review everything that happened today and everything that might happen tomorrow. You try relaxation techniques, but even those become something to, am I doing this right? Is it working? Why isn't it working? Should I try something else? The irony is suffocating. You can't even rest without thinking about resting. There's also the emotional numbing that can come with chronic overthinking. When your mind is constantly churning, constantly in analysis mode, you lose touch with your emotions. You can name what you're feeling, you can analyze it, dissect it, explain it, but you can't actually feel it. Emotions become thoughts instead of experiences. You think about being sad rather than letting yourself be sad. You analyze your anxiety rather than processing it. This creates a strange disconnection from your own life. You're experiencing things, but at a distance, filtered through the lens of constant analysis. And over time, this can lead to depression. Not the overwhelming sadness kind, but the numb, disconnected, what's the point kind? When you're stuck in your head all the time, life loses its immediacy, its vibrancy, its aliveness. Everything becomes flat, conceptual, exhausting. So what do? How do you break the cycle when your brain has been running this program for years, maybe decades? The first thing to understand is that you can't think your way out of overthinking. You can't analyze your way to peace. Because the problem isn't that you're thinking wrong. The problem is that you're thinking too much. And more thinking, even thinking about thinking, just perpetuates the cycle. So the solution has to involve something other than thought. It has to involve your body, your breath, your present moment, experience. This is where practices like mindfulness become crucial, not as a band-aid, but as a genuine intervention. Mindfulness isn't about emptying your mind or achieving some blissful state. It's about noticing when you're overthinking and gently, without judgment, bringing yourself back to the present moment, back to your breath, back to the sensations in your body, back to what's actually happening right now instead of what might happen or what did happen. Research supports this. A study from Harvard Medical School found that regular mindfulness practice actually changes brain structure. It decreases activity in the areas associated with rumination and increases activity in areas associated with present moment awareness. Another study published in Internal Medicine showed that mindfulness-based interventions were as effective as antidepressants for preventing depression relapse, particularly in people prone to rumination. This isn't woo-woo. This is neuroscience. Your brain is plastic. It can change, but it requires practice, consistency, and patience. You can't meditate once and expect your overthinking to disappear. You have to train your brain the way you'd train a muscle, repeatedly, gently, over time. But mindfulness alone isn't enough if you're not addressing the underlying beliefs driving the overthinking. You have to examine the stories you're telling yourself. Stories like, if I don't think through every possibility, something terrible will happen. Or, if I make a mistake, people will reject me. Or, I have to be perfect to be acceptable. These beliefs feel true, but they're not facts. They're learned patterns, usually from childhood, that your brain is still running on autopilot. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, is particularly effective for overthinkers because it helps you identify these thought patterns and challenge them. It teaches you to catch yourself in the spiral and ask, is this thought helpful? Is it true? Is it necessary right now? And often the answer is no. the thought isn't helping. It's just creating anxiety. It's not based in current reality. It's based in old fears. And it's not necessary right now because this moment right here is actually okay. You also need to practice making decisions without overthinking them. Start small. Order the first thing on the menu that sounds good. Send the text without rewriting it. Make a choice and then move on. Not because the choice doesn't matter, but because the anxiety of deliberating is worse than the risk of being wrong. And here's what you'll discover. Most of the time, nothing catastrophic happens. The world doesn't end. People don't reject you. And even when things don't go perfectly, you survive. You handle it. You move forward. And each time you prove to yourself that you can make decisions without endless analysis, you weaken the grip that overthinking has on you. You build evidence that you can trust yourself, that you don't need certainty to take action, that imperfection is not only acceptable, but inevitable and survivable. Physical movement is also critical. Overthinking traps energy in your head, in your thoughts. Movement brings you back into your body. It discharges the stress, the tension, the pent-up energy that comes from constant mental activity. It doesn't have to be intense exercise. Walking works. Dancing works. Anything that gets you out of your head and into your body. There is research showing that aerobic exercise reduces rumination and improves mood as effectively as therapy in some cases. When you move, you're literally changing your neurochemistry. You're increasing endorphins, reducing cortisol, improving blood flow to your brain. You're giving your overactive mind a break by redirecting your attention to physical sensation. And then there's the practice of self-compassion. Overthinkers are notoriously harsh with themselves. They beat themselves up for overthinking, which just creates more to overthink about. They criticize themselves for being anxious, which makes them more anxious. It's a vicious cycle. But what if, instead of judging yourself for overthinking, you met yourself with compassion? What if you acknowledge that your brain is doing its best to protect you, even if the method isn't working? What if you said, of course I'm overthinking. I learned to do this to stay safe. And now I'm learning new ways. That shift from self-criticism to self-compassion is profound. Research from Kristen Neff and others has shown that self-compassion reduces anxiety, increases resilience, and improves overall mental health. It doesn't mean you're letting yourself off the hook. It means you're treating yourself like someone worth caring for, even when you're struggling. Here's something else that's important. Connection. Real. Authentic connection with people who can hold space for your anxiety without trying to fix it. Overthinkers often isolate because they're embarrassed by their thoughts, or they don't want to burden others, or they assume no one will understand. But isolation makes overthinking worse. When you're alone with your thoughts, they amplify. But when you share them with someone safe, someone who can say, I hear you, and you're not crazy, the thoughts lose some of their power. They become manageable. You realize you're not alone. You realize other people have these experiences too. And that normalization, that sense of being understood, it's healing in ways that logic and analysis never can be. You also need to set boundaries with your own mind. This sounds strange, but it's necessary. Your brain will keep churning out thoughts 24/7 if you let it. So you have to create structure, scheduled worry time. Literally set aside 15 minutes a day where you're allowed to overthink all you want. Write it all down, analyze everything, go wild. But outside of that time, when the thoughts come, you acknowledge them and say, I'll think about this during my worry time. And then you redirect your attention. This technique, called stimulus control, has been shown to reduce rumination by creating boundaries around it. You're not suppressing the thoughts, which doesn't work. You're containing them, which does. Let me be clear about something. Overthinking isn't something you'll probably eliminate completely. If you're wired this way, if your brain learned this pattern early, it will always be a tendency, but it doesn't have to run your life. You can learn to notice when it's happening. You can learn to interrupt the spiral. You can learn to choose differently. Not every time, not perfectly, but often enough that you start to feel some spaciousness, some relief, some sense that you're not entirely at the mercy of your thoughts. And that's everything. That's the difference between drowning and swimming. Both involve being in the water, but one allows you to breathe. Here's the ultimate truth about overthinking. You're not broken. You're not defective. You're not too sensitive or too anxious or too much. You have a brain that learned to protect you through vigilance and analyses. And that brain is still trying to protect you, even when the methods are outdated. So the work isn't to fix yourself. It's to update the software, to teach your brain that you're safe now, that you don't need to anticipate every threat, that uncertainty isn't dangerous, that mistakes aren't catastrophic. And that takes time. It takes practice. It takes falling back into old patterns and gently guiding yourself out again. It takes self-compassion when you mess up and celebration when you choose differently. It takes all of this consistently over time. But here's what you gain. You gain presence. The ability to actually be in the moment instead of 6 steps ahead or 3 steps behind. You gain peace. Not the absence of thoughts, but a different relationship with them. You gain connection, the ability to show up authentically instead of performing a carefully analyzed version of yourself. You gain energy because when you're not spending all your resources on mental gymnastics, you have fuel for actually living your life. You gain trust in yourself, in your decisions, in your ability to handle whatever comes. And you gain freedom, the freedom to just be without the constant commentary, without the endless analysis, without the exhausting weight of overthinking every single thing. So if you're an overthinker, I want you to know this. Your mind is powerful. It's capable of deep thought, complex analysis, profound understanding. That's a gift. The challenge is learning to wield it rather than being wielded by it. Learning to think intentionally rather than compulsively. Learning to engage your mind when it serves you and quiet it when it doesn't. And yes, that's hard. Yes, it takes work. Yes, there'll be days when you feel like you're right back where you started, but you're not. Every time you notice you're overthinking, that's progress. Every time you choose to come back to the present moment, that's growth. Every time you make a decision without analyzing it to death, that's healing. You're not trying to become someone who doesn't think deeply. You're trying to become someone who thinks deeply and also rests. Who analyzes when it's useful and lets go when it's not? Who uses their powerful mind without being imprisoned by it? And that version of you, they're already here. They're just waiting for you to stop overthinking long enough to notice